I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Mr. Zarzecki, can you please call roll?
Mr. Roman.
Here.
Ms. Chick.
Here.
Mr. Kuzno is absent with notice. Mr. Quinto.
Here.
Ms. Lafante.
Here.
Ms. Steffens. Ms. Zarzecki present.
Thank you. Everyone received a copy of the agenda tonight?
Yes.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I support. Any question on that motion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. First call to the public. Anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission, please step up to the podium. Seeing none, we'll move on. Clarifications should be...
People coming in.
Oh, okay. Clarifications from the commissioners? None? Okay. Correspondence, Ms. Byrd? Thank you. There's no public hearings tonight.
Excuse me.
Go to reports of committees. Board of Trustees report, Ms. Chick.
The Board of Trustees met November 28th. We received our annual audit report from Pfeffer, Hanford, and Polka. The township is doing well with their procedures and finances. We received a good rating. The board approved the final draft and release of the RFP for North Village and the Downtown Strategic Action Plan recommendation. The board also approved the conditional use for the Ann Arbor Dog Club. The board also approved office hours for our zoning administrator. She'll be in the office to meet with applicants, answer questions, and work with the township for 4 hours weekly. She will also maintain her current normal responsibilities with the township. Additionally, there was a lengthy discussion on medical marijuana dispensaries and whether the township should opt in, allowing the possibility of a dispensary to do business in Northfield. The board listened to several members of the audience comments, as well as distributing to the board correspondence and phone calls received. A packet was also distributed with hundreds of comments from the public made online regarding the issue. No vote was taken or decisions made at this time. We are still doing research and taking comments. There is a suggestion to let it go on the ballot in conjunction along with the gubernatorial election. That's all I have.
Thank you. ZBA report, Ms. Steffens.
I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr.
Regarding
Aquino.
thank you, the zoning hours, are they going to be consistent? You didn't mention a day, so.
They didn't choose a day. Basically, it's kind of by appointment. But she will be in the office in blocks of 4 hours, correct?
Actually, at this time, she's planning on Wednesday morning.
Okay.
And then we'll try to tell people those are appointment times so we can set.
Okay.
Hopefully that'll help guide people in for the time.
Okay, so if you didn't hear that, it looks like it's going to be Wednesday mornings by appointment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
ZBA report, Ms. Steffens.
Thank you. The ZBA did not meet in November.
Staff report, Ms. Byrd. Planning consultant, Mr. Lippens.
Nothing this evening that's not on the agenda.
Thank you. Parks and Recs, Mr. Aquino.
We did not meet in November. We are switching to every other month. Our December meeting will be on the 21st, and then our meeting after that would be in February. So the public is welcome. It will be downstairs in the conference room, again on December 21st. Thank you.
Any downtown planning group report, Ms. Infante?
No.
Thank you. We have no unfinished business. We'll move to new business. We have discussions on some topics. Mr. Lippens.
Sure. This evening, since we've made some progress on some of the ongoing Planning Commission work plan items, thought it would be nice to meet, offer kind of brief discussion, but also offer Planning Commissioners an opportunity to share any additional thoughts that they've had over the last month or two about some of the items. So we've placed items on the agenda. We do have some updates. I guess I'll cover these kind of 4 items for discussion this evening, and maybe we can go through them one. But the first is township procedures, which is separate from the zoning amendment discussion. But for the purpose this evening, we have provided a flow chart of the site plan process, which I'll walk through in a moment for discussion. But this is certainly something that we can update administratively. So if we have suggestions or modifications that we can make that are consistent with how the township processes applications, we can always update. This is really a tool that we have to help people through the site plan process, and it's an opportunity for us to make clarifications and revisions. So I thought it would be good to add for our packet for discussion this evening. We have also, I included the memo that we discussed on potential near-term zoning amendments. I do have an update this evening that I have been working with the township manager to authorize us to begin working on this, authorize Planning Commission and us as the consultant to work on these amendments, and hope that information will be included on the next board agenda. So right now it's under review, and I think the board packet will go out tomorrow if it's ready. And we haven't made that decision yet, but so you know we are working on it. And tonight, if I've included the memo, if anyone has any additional thoughts, we can talk about that. Also, as part of what we are sending to the board is the authorization to start the master plan. As planning commissioners know, we discussed rather earlier this year than initiating the master plan, pushing it off to 2018 and essentially splitting the budget for that process over 2 fiscal years. That would be, if we stick to that plan, that would mean we would start that process in January, plan to complete it in December of next year. So with the zoning amendments, we're also sending that authorization to the board to review soon, hopefully at the next meeting. But I thought tonight, if anyone has had any additional thoughts about things that we should look at in the master plan process, it would be good to hear from Planning Commission tonight about that. And then finally, for discussion, is the release of the RFP for North Village, which has been approved. And we included the latest markup. I have worked with the township manager on refining the release schedule as we were kind of directed by the board. Essentially, we added a little bit of time to it, and I can go over those dates tonight. So that's my overview. And we can take these in any order, but I'll refer back to the commission.
Thank you. Why don't we just start with the township procedures, and we'll just work our way down through. Mr. Lippens.
Okay. Is everyone in receipt of the flow chart that Mary distributed? So this is it's a fairly basic flow chart, but it does describe a fairly complicated process. From the receipt of applications to the review, whether it's an administrative review, or if it can't be approved administratively, the site plan will come to Planning Commission. So I'll walk through that. Item 1 is the concept meeting with the zoning administrator planner. Of course, we also meet with the township manager. But this is really an opportunity for us to talk through the business ideas and what the potential requirements will be. If it is a proposal that requires a PUD, it goes through a different part of a plan unit development, goes to a different part of the ordinance, which is also a site plan review, but plan unit developments also are zoning reviews, so it's a combined process. So the next step, it's determined whether or not that proposal would qualify for an administrative review, or if it requires a Planning Commission review. If it is an administrative review, the plan can be performed or reviewed by the zoning administrator. The zoning administrator can request specific opinions from the engineer or from the planner as part of that process. We did, when we discussed the potential zoning changes, one of the things we discussed was incorporating a sketch plan into this process so that we made it easier actually to, if you did qualify for an administrative review, to actually prepare the materials that were needed for review. If the plan is required to go to Planning Commission, we would receive an application. Parallel to this process, I think it's important to note that there are other agency reviews required. It's the expectation that applicants will, during the time they're working with the township to get approvals, also work with other agencies to get those approvals as well. This second meeting, the staff review meeting, is one that I think we should do more frequently. We don't always do a staff review meeting at this time, but it's something that I think would be helpful. Essentially, once the initial site plan is reviewed, we could have an opportunity where we actually meet again with the applicant and go through those initial comments, or essentially the deficiencies where the plans do not meet the code. And that might be an opportunity for us to possibly shorten the amount of revisions, improve customer service, and make connections with applicants about that process to keep them on track. So I think that is a good meeting and something that we might consider interjecting more frequently into the process. If the application is determined as being complete, meaning that they have included on their site plan all of the required information and substantively met the requirements of the zoning ordinance, that plan will be approved to come to Planning Commission for your decision. And really, by the time we get to Planning Commission, we want to make sure that those plans are relatively complete and substantively meet the code, so that you can make your decisions confidently with the information that's needed. Following your decision, we need to make sure that any conditions that were placed on that site plan are met on a final site plan approval. And I think we're going off of the page that I have, but that would get into the zoning administrator and the building process. So that is a brief overview. I think there's opportunities for us to provide maybe some more detail or even just improve the legibility of this chart. And of course, we can take ideas for modifications to this process. And depending on what those ideas are, we might have to determine if they need to be amendments to the zoning ordinance or if they're things that can be handled administratively. So that is my overview, and I will return back to the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Aquinto.
Thank you. I know it was discussed about the project conceptual meeting, and I couldn't remember, is there going to be a cost associated with that for the individual?
There is a cost associated with the concept meeting. We are, now that the zoning administrator is going to be on site for 4 hours a week, we're going to try to schedule meetings at the time when her regularly scheduled office hours are. So I don't know if we might revisit the fee schedule in the new year.
Okay.
But there is, I think the current fee is $300 for. There's a separate fee for the engineer.
Because I remember the discussion that you were going to have the township planner, zoning administrator, and any other individuals that might have been necessary to attend that original meeting for one, realistic small fee. And, I understand there has to be a fee with that, but I think it should be one set fee and not, then here's another fee and here's another fee if so-and-so has to come and so-and-so has to come. That's just my thought. And then the next question I have, the staff review meeting that you would have step 3, if they're already in the process and they've already submitted their application, because there's a cost for the application process, correct? There's not going to be another fee for that staff review meeting, though, correct? Because again, I don't want to nickel and dime people to death when they're coming in front of the township for development, because that's been the statements that have been out there, is that it's one fee, then it's another fee, then it's another fee. So I think it's very important to have an established fee, but it's streamlined so that, like the staff review meeting, that there's not another cost for that. And that's why, I'm bringing this up.
I think that's a fair point. You know, I think that in many cases it should be determined by an applicant or a business owner's request. You know, I think someone could request 5 meetings with us if they're willing to pay for it and feel like they're going to decrease their time, get a more efficient process, have the opportunity to interact with township staff. It can be very beneficial to meet. But oftentimes, you know, what I actually do is I call people and I talk to them while I'm reviewing the plan and say, you know, even if it would be more helpful, I'll talk to your engineer directly. And so that I can handle a lot of the issues that are handled in a face-to-face meeting as part of their regular site plan fee. I think when we look at this process, since we've started, you know, we've initiated trying to hold weekly or bi-weekly department meetings too. We might be able to try to schedule some time with applicants on those days. I think working towards increased efficiency and making it easier for residents to interact with township staff is a goal that we'll work on, and certainly relevant to this conversation.
Ms. Chick.
Okay, number 1 on the flow chart. Planning Commission member may attend. How will the Planning Commission be notified that there is a concept meeting coming up so that either one or any one of us can attend?
Maybe we should copy Larry on those meetings. That would be my suggestion. I don't think that that's been happening, but the other suggestion that I could have would be to designate an official appointee of Planning Commission to receive those invites. I think either one of those strategies would be appropriate.
Okay, because up to this point, we've never even known that there's been a concept meeting held. We hear after the fact, but we've never been advised beforehand, so that any one of us, if we wanted to, could attend. So this concept meeting would be held with the township planner, the zoning administrator, I'm assuming the township manager, and a planning commission member.
Yes. My only concern about planning commission attending would be that no more than 3. We can't got to avoid quorum,
Right.
but
No, I was thinking one member.
yeah. So I think it's a great idea. I don't know if we want to CC Larry on communications or designate someone.
Well, I have further comments.
Okay,
I mean,
all right.
we could probably
All right.
shed some
All right.
of my ideas, but
I have another question then. On the applicant submitting a new or reviews plans for the administrative review regarding the sketch plan, what qualifies for a sketch plan and what would not qualify for a sketch plan?
I can pull up the zoning ordinance while we talk and come up with that. There's a specific reference, but I
Okay.
think that it's a change of use that's consistent with the district, but I should probably find the code reference to that,
Okay.
if you'll give me a minute.
All right, and then just one more on the staff review meeting. The staff, are you talking about the township staff, like Mary Bird and the same people that would have attended the project concept meeting? Is that typically how it goes?
The staff review meeting, yeah, I think it would be the same.
Same as the project
The
concept?
same attendees would be invited.
Okay, all right, perfect.
It might be more, so in the concept meeting, it might be less common to have, say, the engineer attend, but
Okay.
by the time we get to the staff review meeting, if we had identified engineering issues, it might be more likely that they would attend at that point in time.
All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and do my questions. And perhaps we can maybe, and I'm sure we have, I have questions regarding the whole flow chart, so I don't want to keep jumping back and forth. But maybe at this time we could discuss about the first project concept meeting, who would be there and its cost, because as Sam mentioned, Sam had very good questions regarding the initial cost to a possible applicant, and some applicants may never come to fruition for what they're intending to do. So to me, it seems like to spend $300, I think that's what the number is, to have a formal meeting when that person doesn't even know if their concept is even going to materialize. I think it's kind of stiff to the applicant, especially, and this is all in the process of being talked about and dealt with administratively. But I guess I would like to see a freebie for an applicant on the project conception plan meeting, and I thought that could tie in with what the Board of Trustees discussed regarding this. We have a zoning administrator that's going to be in the office for X amount of days for this time, so many days per month. And so the missing person, obviously, the township manager, I think, should be specified on number one. I think that's very important that the township manager be part of the first concept meetings, especially to be there present for an applicant's first visit. But also, I don't know exactly how you would fit into that yourself, Paul, into this idea, if it was to be, if that can be covered somehow on your time,
Well,
or how it works exactly now. I guess and before you answer, the bigger question is, I think the Planning Commission right now at this time don't know exactly how things are being handled.
right.
So
That's the point for this conversation, and going back to what's on file. And oftentimes, practice differs slightly from the like a flow chart like this, which is why we might take an opportunity to update it and say, well, let's do something a little bit more practical, something that people understand, or modify things that aren't working. But with respect to providing a freebie, I would say that the board certainly just invested in providing additional services to residents by having the zoning administrator on site. And I'd remind everyone too that before you even get to the site plan process, there's the zoning administration process. So the amount determining, I would call it project initiation. So when you initiate your project, decide you want to do something, what happens? The first thing that happens is they go to the township and they say, this is what I want to do. What do I have to do? And that's the zoning administrator. And the zoning administrator will say if it's permitted, and if it's not permitted, what they have to do. And that goes into the site plan process. So I think that having the zoning administrator on site as a freebie is absolutely an investment that the board decided to make in improving services. Beyond that, I think it is certainly appropriate for Planning Commission to recommend that you would also like the township to have a certain level of base planning services provided without fees. That's the type of recommendation that Planning Commission can make.
Thank you. Because in my mind, even if you weren't, if it could be worked out with the township on the zoning administrator's available hours, that a person with a concept comes in, say they would like to have a concept meeting. These meetings can be set at the times convenient for the zoning administrator when she's in the office. You don't possibly necessarily have to be there, because you don't even know if it's going to go past the point of approval for the zoning administrator.
Yep.
So I guess that's key to that we start from square one with how a person coming in the office would be dealt with. I think the staff in the office should direct a possible applicant to a date that's going to be available for the zoning administrator, and of course the township manager would be probably more accessible to be at those meetings than yourself. And really, if it's not going to get past the zoning administrator's approval, obviously there's no need for further information for you. But
And-
you would be key in the staff review, actually probably before that. But if it's something that is actually pretty visible that it could be approved, then of course she's out of your office. I'm sure there could be some correspondence and possibly an intermediate meeting on a proposal or development or a concept happen somewhere between step 1 and 2, or step 1 and submitting an application. So, I mean that, and it's really not the planning commission's purview to say, you know, on expenses for yourself, for your services. And, you know, it's ultimately going to be approved by the board, but that's the kind of concept that I'm thinking about in my mind, because to pay $300 and not even know that you can walk out with even a possibility of being okay, I think that's what Mr. Aquino was talking about.
Yeah, so, and that makes sense to me, but just so you know, I mean, by the time you have a concept meeting with the planner, the person who's applying, they're pretty sure that they want to have, you know, they want to do the project, and they want to do it on the site. They know that they can do it on the site, and what we're there to talk about is what the requirements are to get, you know, if it's a building, how it has to be built, what the site layout has to be, you know, what the existing conditions are, so that we can expedite the process and get the site plan prepared effectively. So by the time we do that meeting 1, project concept meeting, that they should have already gone through the zoning administrative
Okay,
process.
but that's not what we have here, though. So if you're saying that they need to be pre-screened by the zoning administrator, that would be step 1. So I want to make it crystal clear as we go through this, so there's no confusion on anybody's part or anybody's,
So
you know.
we're looking at the site plan part of the process, not the entire development process. So the page that you're looking at here doesn't include that project initiation. And maybe what we're discovering here is that there's somewhat a deficiency that we're not showing, you know, from the time someone thinks about doing something to the time they get approval on this one chart. Maybe we need to show the project initiation, the zoning compliance part of the process, and then the site plan separately, and then maybe building separately after that.
Possibly, but if you, obviously, we don't know the process, what has actually happened. I mean, we have an idea, but for us to come up with suggestions to improve something, we need to know exactly what's happening, how it is now. But yeah, I agree with you, but I don't know if we have to break it down that far.
Okay.
Possibly a bubble before 1, and you can call it what you want, but if we're going to come up with something, I want it to be crystal clear to everybody in the process.
I'd like to
Ms.
see
Chick.
I'd like to see the project initiation part of this flow chart, so that it's clear to everybody. In regard to the fee was assessed typically just to cover the cost of the people doing the work. If we're going to schedule these meetings when Vidia's in the office, she's already getting paid for her time in the office, so that's a consideration too, so that's a good idea.
Correct. Mr. Aquino.
Because step 1, to me, sounds like the initial introduction, because it says discuss the project ideal and concept, review zoning and use, review the need for special steps such as special land use or variances, and identify requirements for municipal sewer and water services if applicable. So, to me, that's the original first step prior to, sitting down, getting ready to do your site plan. To find out, according to these steps, to me, that's the initial introduction. Say, hey, I have this idea. Well, does this property I have here fit the use and the, and the zoning, and what special steps would I need for that? So, to me, that is the first step from what it's saying here.
Except that the zoning compliance, at this point, they've already been told what you want to do is permitted in that district on that site, and the correct way for you to get your approval is to get site plan approval. And whether that's an administrative site plan approval or planning commission approval, that's what they don't know at that point in time. So they know that they have a project. They've been told that the project is eligible in the zoning district that they want, and then they do this meeting to figure out, or to work with staff on what the approval process will be.
I personally believe that this meeting should be done in person because, I know of definitely one business that had miscommunication from the office here, from person to person to person, where if it's done in person and dealt with as it spells out here, it is clear, cut, crystal, and there's no confusion. Because again, I'm referring back to this one person that they were really confused because they were being told this, they were being told this. The supervisor was involved here and this and that, and again, they were really, really confused. Okay? And that's what we need to avoid. And this process, step one, would stop that miscommunication. It would be specific for the people that should be involved and the people that shouldn't be involved, so that they are getting it clear-cut, sitting down with the people that are the powers that should be and dealing with it in person. Because that's been the problem that has been happening continuously with Northfield Township.
I'm going to see what the other commissioners would like to say about it. Ms. Infante?
I just want to quickly pipe in because I was a little confused about the number of steps on the flow chart and the 7 steps to project approval and the checklist with the formalization of the fees, that item on our agenda, because it seemed to me that there was a step missing, exactly, and that we know everything comes down to expectations. And if someone understands why, for example, a stiff fee of $300 is being charged and it's an expectation, then it'll fly if they can see exactly why. So I thought that there was, again, a disjunction between what we were looking at, and I understand you're saying it's a difference between administrative versus planning commission. We're looking at a stage of the process, but I think we should start from a layperson's point of view. I walk into the office, or I call, what information do I get? Exactly what are the steps and what are the fees associated? Because if we can manage expectation, then everything will flow so much more easily. And I also don't know anything about budgets, but it really does seem to me we ought to have some sort of line item to support an initial introduction to this whole process for someone who is interested. But I don't know if that's realistic or not. If it is in the office, it sounds like it's a possibility, but I don't want to make more work for anybody, definitely not more work for the staff.
Ms. Stefan? Mr. Lippens, go ahead.
There was a comment about the 7 steps to project approval, which is something that was listed in our memo about potential process and zoning amendments we discussed a couple months ago. That's an idea. So the idea is we have a pamphlet which would even come in advance of, this is like technical. This is your flow chart. If you're in the process and you want to see all the steps, it's a little more detailed. But what we were thinking is we should have a pamphlet and that would say, first project initiation, then site plan, then you do your building, so that's not 7 steps, but we would try and really synthesize it and have that be kind of colorful, colorful graphics, a handout that anyone could grab, and the idea really is to communicate the process effectively with a handout,
And you could put that online, too.
Right.
Yep.
Ms. Steffens?
Paul, I want to make sure that I understand the flow chart, because it says the project concept meeting with the township planner, zoning administrator, the town manager perhaps. That is before the decision is made whether or not it can be approved through administrative review?
So I think that what's actually happening is if it can be administrative review, sometimes this meeting isn't happening because people have to pay for this meeting, right?
Right, and that's my
So-
concern. Because there are only, I pulled up section 36-865, which is the administrative review. The zoning administrator may review and consider approval, conditional approval, or denial of site plans without submission to the planning commission in 2 instances: expansion or reduction to an existing conforming structure or use of 2,000 square feet or less, or 5% of the floor area of the structure, whichever is less, or B, provision for additional parking, loading, unloading spaces, and landscape improvements as required by ordinance. So if someone meets those criteria, they should not have to go through this concept meeting. They shouldn't have to pay a fee, and it should just be handled administratively by our zoning administrator.
And that's the way we're doing it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, but
having
yeah.
Vidya on site will actually provide that face-to-face opportunity too, so Vidya can explain to people in person, your project qualifies for an administrative review, and we're, saving you from having to go through this site plan approval process. We're going to take you right into the site plan administrative approval process, and then what she does is she would just get an opinion from myself or from the engineer or any staff that needed to provide an opinion in that process, or just write an approval letter.
Right. And I'm not sure where this falls in here, but the engineering, why would an applicant need to meet with an engineer at the concept plan? I'm just not sure. I think it's expensive.
We really
I
don't
would hope
typically
not.
do that.
I would hope not.
Yeah.
Because I know it was just talked about potentially having the engineer here. I'm not sure the planning commission ever needs to see engineering. We're never going to question whether or not it's the right BMP for a project. Personally, I think it holds applicants up in going through the review, and they hire their own engineers, and that takes care of that. And then I'm assuming then we collect an escrow for our own engineering review? Yes, okay, all right. And then finally, and I don't know how else to address the issue that we're all dancing around, other than to just come out and say that I think why we're dealing with this problem is because the township does not have planners on staff. And I don't think 4 hours a week is going to do it. The township as a whole has not adequately addressed having professional planners in the office. Maybe 4 hours is a good start. I'm not sure that it's going to be enough to take care of some of these issues. So I don't know.
I agree with a couple of your statements. I agree. I mean, but right now it's a starting point, and I think the township can make a decision as they go if they're going to need more services or not. But I disagree with the comment about not requiring or not having engineering necessary for the planning commission. A number of reasons. There's a lot of cases where everything in the planning process can be fine, but the engineering is not. So that is just a piece of the entire picture that the planning commission needs to see to make a decision. So I kind of disagree that I think engineering's at least as important as everything else on the site plan that should be submitted to us. But that's a good point, Ms. Steffens. Ms. Chick?
In regard to, it is a start having a zoning administrator in the office, and it's costly. And we would love to have a planner, a township planner, but it is extremely costly. So it's just a matter of dollars.
Thank you, Ms. Chick. Mr. Zarzaki?
I pretty much agree with almost everything that's been stated so far. Cost-wise, one, we can limit our exposure by setting a time limit of how much time this initial meeting, the concept meeting is, the first half hour, the first hour. It's going to be hard to set that because it's going to depend upon the size of the project. That's the problem. But if it's a residential, I would think a half hour would be adequate, where a commercial project's going to take at least an hour. So that would be, something that we would not charge for that period of time. But plus the fact we only have the zoning administrator here for 4 hours a week, that would only give us 4 meetings a week at that point, or 8 residentials, something like that. But besides all her other functions she has to perform at that same period of time. So, it's very expensive to have a planner on staff. I can attest to that very, very much so. When I was in the business, we had 2 or 3 of them on our staff, and I know what their costs were. So, but as the township grows, it's going to be something that we're going to have to look at. Whether it's hired out, as we are doing now, or bring one on staff. I think right now we're still at the point of, utilizing outside source for that for quite some time. But it will probably involve much more time as things get more developed. So the other thing is this concept meeting, the way it's presented, number one, I think is fine, but the issue of how we're going to meet this criteria, administrative review, needs to be defined and set down in writing so everybody's aware of what's going on. And engineering-wise, we don't need the engineer here for the concept meeting, obviously, but anything past that, we're definitely going to have an engineering review at that point. So that's all I've got right now.
Thank you. Mr. Lippens, do you have any comments? Should we continue on questions further down the chart?
I thought that was a very good conversation. I took notes.
Thank you. So I think we've touched on the initial step in meeting. If we move on down, again, I had the same question as Ms. Chick regarding the sketch plan. If you can, and as Ms. Steffens also indicated, in an administrative review, so if someone, let's use an example or a hypothetical, someone comes in, what they want to do is allowed in the area, the use is allowed. They don't need to go through the other process. So what at that time? So what are we talking about? A sketch plan? What is it exactly, and what's required?
Well, currently a sketch plan is not an option. That I was commenting that we would like to make sketch plans an option by revising the ordinance to permit them. And as part of that, we would define what qualified for a sketch plan and what details we would want submitted on a sketch plan.
So you're saying that you want to have the sketch plan, or we're doing it now? Which is it? We're doing it now currently?
We are not. We are not. What I was saying was, when we look at updating the zoning ordinance, I would recommend that we add that provision for greater flexibility. We discussed that at one of the prior meetings. Now, there isn't an administrative approval, but it's an approval of a site plan, which means it has to be prepared and stamped by a professional. It would be, I think, the key difference.
That's what's required now,
Correct.
a stamped engineering submittal.
Yes.
Okay, and that's in our current zoning ordinance? Okay, thank you. Anyone else have comments or going, Mr. Zarzaki?
For the sketches, perhaps we should use AIA designation of what a sketch should include, or at least present that to the rest of the commissioners so they can understand. AIA, the Architectural Institute of America, is what all drawings. Yeah, but they give you the basics of what a drawing is supposed to have on it. They do have a designation as a sketch. It may be a little bit too complicated in some cases for what we want, but at least we'll have a template to start with that we can see what is done in the industry and go from there. I think I have one at home. I'll have to go back and look. But if not, I can get one from my office. But that would be a good template to start with, giving us size, things like that that need to be on the sketch, the minimum requirements, rather than us trying to make up our own. Let's use something that's already standard in the industry.
Any other comments on that? Seeing none? Okay. So at this point, then they're either going to have go through an administrative review, or they know that they are going to submit full-blown plans. So then that takes us to the submittal of the application. So at this point, and I had mentioned it in previous meetings, and I don't know if there's any feedback from the administration or the Board of Trustees, or possibly you can comment on it, Mr. Lippens, but I was talking about zoning compliance inspections. In other words, you get an administrative review approval to do something. Who is actually going out to that site, that building, looking at it, making sure anything is up to code or not, in order for them to go through a process and even know what they need to do to get a certificate of occupancy in the end. So can you comment on that?
So that process we are currently doing. If a site plan is approved, we do a zoning compliance inspection at the end of that process. It's done by the zoning administrator, and any items that are not conforming to the approved site plan are noted, communicated to the developer, and requests for those changes is communicated.
But that's the site plan. That's outside where it's located, situated. How about the buildings themselves? That's not currently being done, correct?
Well, for a building permit?
No, there may or may not be a building permit, but the idea is that how can anybody in the end, without having set foot inside of the building that is proposed, or to propose to be used if it's existing, or if it's new, obviously you're going to get building permits, but that's not always the case. So I guess zoning compliance inspections would be for existing buildings. So I don't think that process is being done at this time.
Right, only for site plan projects. But if your question also relates for projects that do not go through the site plan process, so I would make a note of this for review when we do review of the zoning ordinance to catch anything that we haven't already noted in our memo about things we'd like to update. One potential thing to do is establish a zoning compliance permit, and essentially that would be, that would allow anything that didn't require a building permit or site plan to have another permitting process and inspection process. That is something that I've done in more than one community that doesn't have that process in place.
Right. Ms. Chick?
We still use Kurt Weiland, don't we? Yes, to do our inspections. Yeah.
But at this point though, I don't think he's doing existing structures on a zoning compliance. On a new business going into an existing building, are there any inspections being done? Under a new permit. But at times there would be no permit. There's possibility of no permits being pulled. So then he would not step foot in there. That's a difference. And that would include fire, also. Okay.
So I've made that note for future reviews.
I'm sorry, I have a question. At what point does the fire inspection happen? If they're not doing any interior remodel, does the fire inspect for a change of use?
They should, but I'll let
Yes,
Mr.
they do.
Lippens, okay.
Okay, all right.
They should be receiving a plan, a copy of everything, whether it's existing or new,
Yes.
which I think our best example is the last one. Through the process, I don't think fire got it up front, but they had something that they needed to have done
The
on this most recent.
dog training?
Yes.
Okay. So does fire review the plans before?
I don't know. Mary, can you answer? Yes.
Okay. All right, so then what is the concern about an existing?
Building?
Yes.
Everything else with the building. Building codes, electric codes, plumbing codes, heating, all the other.
But if they got their C of O and there's no,
They shouldn't get one. They're still in the process.
for an existing building?
Correct. That's the intent of the zoning compliance inspections, would be to go out to the existing building, make sure that it's all up to snuff. Then they would be able to go in and open their business and get a certificate of occupancy.
And so nobody is doing that now?
I don't believe so.
The building department is not doing a C of O on a change of use?
Mary, can you answer that? Okay.
So,
All right, because could not the code enforcement officer do the zoning part of it?
The zoning administrator can designate, I believe by our code, they can get inspections done. A ordinance officer or code enforcement officer isn't necessarily versed or certified to do these inspections that we're talking about.
Our code enforcement officer in Hamburg does change of use inspections for the, I'm talking about the zoning.
For the
ordinance
zoning
part.
portion,
For the zoning portion, as well as C of O for zoning portion as well.
it's possible that the zoning administrator could utilize that person on their behalf, but the end call is the zoning administrator. But typically, maybe in the jurisdiction where you're at, that may work. I don't know if the person's certified qualifications. I don't know. Mr. Lippens, do you have anything to add for that?
I've made a note, I understand the issue.
No.
I think we'll revisit it.
If you could answer Ms. Steffen's question any better?
I mean, I think if you have a code enforcement person that is able to do that inspection, it could be a designated task from the zoning administrator. I concur.
Thank you. Ms. Chick?
Could I ask Mr. Do you know if Janelle is certified to do inspections? I don't think I saw that in her.
I believe from talking to her that is some. Sorry. Is it on now?
I don't believe so. There it is.
There, okay. In talking to her in her present job in another municipality, it sounded like she was doing a lot more work than just code enforcement, including the type of work that's being described by Amy. What I'm looking at is initially there's a whole stack of inspections that need to be done. Problem areas, what we've been doing is pulling together staff, attorneys, and so forth. We had our second meeting this morning, and we're identifying exactly who's going to do what in carrying out some of these more difficult ones. And I've charged Mary and the code enforcement and zoning, since they're all going to be sharing space, that they work out between them what they need to do to help one another to accomplish this. The attorneys are doing it as part of their retainer. It's not costing us anything extra for their time. The fire chief was present today as well, and myself and the supervisor. So we're just trying to get some of these backlog caught up. Now, concept-wise, in terms of somebody coming in to see the zoning administrator, I'm just saying that when they come up and they talk to Mary and she feels like there's a project that needs to be referred to her, that she would say, well, she's going to be in on Wednesday, and why don't you make an appointment? And by making appointments, we know we're not going to get a backlog of a whole bunch of people waiting at the same time for her services. And if at some point they can't make it, then we could make special arrangements otherwise. So, but we know there's a lot to do to catch up.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. Quick question: does the township do its own fire reviews, or have they ever sent out like a plan for a fire review? Is it done in-house, or do they send it out? Any knowledge of that?
Well, the chief does the initial review, and then I think at times the engineering firms are brought in to do further detail. Like, I'm sure on some of the more complicated cases they're brought in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So is there any other questions or comments until we get to the staff review meeting? How about questions or comments on the staff review meeting? Mr. Lippens, I got a question or a comment. I guess review overall project idea and concept, that would probably be taken care of in number 1 rather than 3. And then, so at this point, this would be where, if necessary, and the township engineer might be necessary to, if his actual written report wouldn't suffice, then actually you could bring him in if necessary. But at this point, you've gotten the application, we've gotten the plans, a review has been done, and so this is more or less a final meeting with the applicant to inform them what needs to be done. Am I correct?
Yeah. I think that this is, currently I would say this is optional or by request, and really is not happening, at least in the time I've been here. I'm looking at Mary, she's looking at like it's not happening.
Right.
You know, I think because a lot of these details are handled directly with the applicant. We have, you know, I'll give an example. We did go and meet with Ann Arbor Dog Club on site to talk through some of the issues that they were having with their site plan review. That's really similar to this review meeting number 3. We just did it on their site so we could look at it. Similarly, when the Barbara Downs application was happening, I went to their site and I talked with them and walked the site with them. So it's not like we're not finding opportunities to interact with people. We're just doing it less formally than saying, part of our process is to have a staff review meeting. But I think it can be accomplished in multiple ways, and I think certainly by request, sometimes a meeting is the best way to do it.
I think in the reviews that we've seen come in front of us in the past several years, if this step was there and being done, would have solidified a lot of loose ends by the time it came to the Planning Commission. But I think it's right that an applicant going through the process have a actual formal meeting that they get told or should be told just about every item, unless it was out of the township's purview, such as the MDEQ or the county health. But still, those requirements or recommendations for a said project should be in hand by the time you have that meeting of number 3. So I think it would solidify any of the issues that a site would have before it continued through the process. It would just clean it up a lot. Any other comments by the commissioners? No. So other than that, I forgot to mention about number 1. Ms. Chick brought it up about the Planning Commission member. My personal view is that I don't think a Planning Commission member should be present in the prior meetings. We now get quarterly reports, although I don't think if a person was going through a full site plan could get completely through the whole process in 3 months, maybe pushing it. I mean, am I right, Mr. Lippens? I mean, 3 months would be pretty fast. So, I mean, we would get quarterly reports. We know what's come in front of the zoning administrator. I personally don't want to be present at a concept meeting because in the end I may have to make a decision on something on the site, and I would rather be hands off till that point. But that's just my opinion, and I'd like to hear from the other commissioners. I see some heads shaking, Mr. Iaquino.
No, I agree wholeheartedly, because if a commissioner's at that meeting, that applicant may have a tendency to start reaching out to that commissioner on an individual basis, and I don't believe that's correct to be able to do so.
I agree with that. Mr. Zarzecki?
No, I also agree. We do not need to have a representative at that first meeting. It's just not normally done.
Right.
Just the point, there's no value added, so.
Thank you. So I think that's a consensus on that, Mr. Lippens. And then even at step number 4, whether it's myself or somebody else, the Planning Commission chair approving the agenda, I think it's really not. It's a lot to look through a whole site plan and all the details to determine if it should be on the agenda in about 4 days. But I think I have confidence in Ms. Bird and yourself that by the time, if you decide something should be forthcoming to the Planning Commission, I'm good with that. I don't think it should be necessary that the chair approve an item for agenda. There's a lot to look at, so, and I think that's, coming from going through the process, you well know better that if it's ready for the Planning Commission or not. And I think this, if we were to establish this whole procedure, I think it's going to improve greatly. Any other comments on that? So, okay. Thank you. Is there anything else on process? I think that was quite a bit.
No, I think that was a great conversation. Certainly, it helps me with, think about how we might improve these materials, but also how to improve the process. So I appreciate the comments.
Thank you. So do you want to go ahead, Mr. Lippens, with the zoning amendments
So-
discussion?
Yeah, so this evening I added this really as informational and an opportunity to hear from Planning Commission if they've had any additional thoughts. I think some of the conversation we just had will go to additional thoughts, but really the update is that, since the last time we discussed this, we had we discussed this meeting on October 11th. Since then, we had a joint meeting with the board. The board had received, they've done a couple meetings on prioritization, had a presentation from the zoning administrator, and, we've had essentially direction to prepare an authorization with the township manager to actually do some of this work. That has been prepared. We hope that'll be on the board's agenda next week, and that's really my update. I walked through this memo in some detail at a previous planning commission meeting, so I'll just let planning commissioners talk about any thoughts they've had since then, any notes that we might have at this point in time.
That was going to be my question to you, was that if you think that we may have some other areas in the actual language of the zoning ordinance, do you want us to present that? And it might give an opportunity until the board authorizes us doing that, that some of us can look through and see if there's any other items that are outstanding. Is that what you're after or not? Or do you want to stick basically to the exact items that are listed on that October memo?
No, so I don't want to just stick to the memo. The memo was an initial review. Part of working on the zoning ordinance will be to do a review and assessment, really a technical review of the entire zoning ordinance. And as part of that process, I think we would take suggestions from Planning Commission on any specific sections they wanted to see addressed. And we would also present, an expanded list. The idea that, as I've proposed it, would be we would do a technical review and continue this process, and then we would do what I'm calling minor amendments, which really means amendments that are consistent with the current township master plan, and technical amendments, which are things that we found that are just kind of incorrect and we should fix. And we do that right away. So as soon as we were ready, we would do those amendments. And then we'd continue throughout the year to do the master plan process. And then at the end of the master plan, likely we will have additional zoning amendments that we want to make, uses in the district, maybe district boundaries, things like that would be consistent with our new master plan. And we would do another set of amendments at the end of the process. So the advantage to doing this way is we don't want to wait a year till we do the master plan, until we do some of the zoning fixes and minor amendments that we really want to do right away.
Okay, thank you. So in the meantime, if any commissioner sees an item that they feel should be addressed, then we can bring it up. And that can happen in the near future. Mr.
Yes.
Aquino had a question.
Did we want to bring up such items now? For him?
If you feel the need, but I mean, we could also bring it up at another, we can put it down as a discussion item in a future meeting, if it's okay with you, but
Yeah.
feel free.
One of the things that just strikes my mind when we're talking about zoning ordinance changes or thoughts to discuss, when Living Water came in front of the Planning Commission, they talked about the mesh for the pervious surfaces, which was going to be, it's a mesh product that gets put over grass to be able to utilize that as a parking area at times, and it's done and approved in other municipalities, such as Ann Arbor. And it was something that we talked about. We would look at it in future, zoning amendment changes. So that would be one item.
I made a note.
Thank you.
Ms. Chick?
I just want to quickly ask, because I'm not sure I understand what it is saying on number 4 and number 4A. Can you explain what that is?
Number 4, revised nonconforming use and nonconforming site standards. Am I in the right place? Yes.
Does that involve?
So this is it's an idea, but essentially the idea would be to establish a new section of the nonconformities ordinance, or nonconformity section of the zoning ordinance, which would permit, it would create multiple classes of nonconforming uses, and essentially the existing class, which would be your nonconforming and you can't improve your building or expand your site. And the second class would be a preferred class of nonconforming uses, which would say you, by similar to special land use approval, have established your use as a nonconforming use, but agreed to make site improvements to bring that site into compliance with the zoning ordinance. Subject to approval to say expand a building so that you could make the use larger. But essentially what that does is it gives nonconforming sites an opportunity to declare their nonconformity, seek approval for a preferred status, and then actually invest in making site improvements despite the fact that it's nonconforming. And this is it doesn't work everywhere, but it does work. I have several communities that do it, and what it does is it can eliminate disincentives for property investment.
So is it like incentivizing people to upgrade their property? Or are they the ones coming and asking for the change, and then you say, yes, we can do that if you do this?
What it does is it would provide property owners that are properties that are non-conforming an option to development. It's a pathway. It wouldn't be something we'd encourage, but it would be
Okay.
an option for site improvement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so I'm assuming, I'm assuming Mr. Lippens, the same would be for the next item, the master plan
Yeah,
process.
The master plan really, I added this to the agenda because we had somewhat deferred starting that process. Initially, I think we hoped to start over the summer, but we worked on the downtown plan. As we get to the point where we had intended to start the process this winter, I thought it would be appropriate just to ask planning commissioners if they have any thoughts about the master plan, things that they wanted to see included. But I think we had previously included looking at a non-motorized plan, updating the goals, and then also doing, focusing on the interchanges with the highway redevelopment, and also looking at the overlay districts as kind of our special interest areas. And of course, incorporating the Downtown Strategic Action Plan and the North Village Plan into the master plan. Previously, we talked about looking at open space preservation as well, which it wasn't included in this July 19 proposal, but I was hoping that we would relook at that as well.
Right, Ms. Chick?
Yeah, actually, that was on my list to add to this. If we could look into putting something in the master plan regarding land preservation, now that we have a committee working on it, we can consult with them as well.
I agree. So noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I think, even when we visited this back, when we received it in July, I think we were all pretty much in agreement with the plan, the proposed memo on the proposed master plan. So if there's any other items any commissioners might realize in the upcoming future, then we can always bring it up at discussion. But I think at that time we were pretty much all in agreement with the goals.
One more question.
Yes,
Is-
Ms. Chair.
I'm sorry. Is
That's
the,
fine.
the Parks and Rec has a kind of a master plan too. Is that already included in our master plan, or do we still need to add that?
It's a standalone document.
Okay.
We could adopt it by reference. I can make a note of that.
And so, going on, we have the last attachment, the RFP. That was for the Board of Trustees. And I'll let Mr. Lippens comment on that.
Yes. So, good news. The board approved releasing the RFP. We are. I had the opportunity to meet with the township manager today. We made some revisions as directed by the board to the timeline. The idea really is to provide ample time to developers to prepare proposals. So we extended it by about a month and hope to release it next week. We plan to prepare a press release, and of course send it to the local paper, but also release it on the township website with the RFP. Post the RFP on the website. Also post it on some professional boards like Mitten, possibly the CNU board or the APA board, and we're looking at, and by board I mean the RFP boards on their website. We're looking at some other ideas, maybe the International Association of Shopping Retailers, or the ICSC, I think it's called, so I didn't quite get that right. Additionally, I think we would like to encourage township residents, planning commission members, board members to actually send it to developers that they know. We have a list of people that have been reaching out to the township about developing certain properties, so we're certainly going to send it directly to those people and to other contacts, and really do our best to spread the word and get it into people's hand. I think that the big date, which is going to remain the same, is January 17th. I think prior to the Planning Commission meeting, we would like to hold essentially an information session, and whether that's, we haven't set a time, whether we do that during the day over the lunch hour, or maybe do it, just prior to Planning Commission. Maybe it's a 6 p.m. meeting. The idea is that we would hold a pre-proposal meeting, explain the work that's been done, and take questions in person, as well as provide some time for people to submit written questions about that process. So I think that's it. This is on the agenda tonight, so I could provide that information and take any comments about the process. If everyone's had an opportunity, to look at the RFP again, I think it's exciting. We're glad that this is being released.
Thank you. Mr. Aquino?
Yes, two things. First, the phasing. If they come in with some different thoughts with the phasing, is that going to be respected and looked at? Okay.
Yes.
Because again, a developer is going to come in and have to make, certain dollar amounts up front. So, and they'll know what that is and isn't. So, perfect. I'm glad that'll be respected. And then you said you were going to move it a month, but yet the pre-proposal meeting is going to stay January 17th?
Yes. So what we added time between when the township responds to questions and the submittal deadline, that was extended a month. So rather than requiring submittals on March 21st, we're intending to have that submittal date be March 21st instead of February 21st. And then essentially everything after that goes back a month.
And what is, hopefully this won't happen, hopefully, what is Plan B if there's not interest?
Well, we have provided anonymous feedback, so we hope that any interested party that spends any time reviewing this and for some reason decides not to submit, that they maybe will write a letter to the township manager and let us know why they chose not to pursue this opportunity. So our hope is even if we don't get submittals, which we think we will, we'll at least get some valuable feedback to take to the board about how we could potentially improve this process and
Okay.
re-release it.
All right, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay. Moving on, everyone received the minutes from November 15th. I make a motion to approve the minutes and dispense with reading.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Iaquinto. Any questions on the motion or comments? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Final call to the public. Anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission? You can step up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. Seeing none. Going, gone, right? Okay. Comments from the commissioners. I'd like to start at Ms. Infante. Thank you. Ms. Steffens.
I'd just like to say thank you to Paul for all the work that you put into working through some of these memos that you've presented tonight. And also thank everyone for, this is my last Planning Commission meeting, stepping away. My work responsibilities have increased, so I have to be at my own Planning Commission hearings, which happen to coincide for the Northfield Township Planning Commission meetings. But I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to serve. It's been a wonderful experience, and I just really appreciate the chance to sit in this chair month after month. And Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Zarzaki.
Paul, you've done a good job on these, and very good job on the proposal. I went through it. I think it, with the minor tweaks, is going to do quite well. There is a lot of interest in the building community for developments right now, so I think we will get more than our minimum 3 that we would like to have. So other than that, that's all I got.
Thank you. Ms. Steffens, I'd like to wish you good luck in your upcoming duties in Hamburg, and it's been a pleasure having you here. You've been a great asset. Always appreciate all your input and thought. It's been very helpful, and wish you luck. You'll be missed.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ms. Chick.
Yeah, I also want to thank you, Amy, for your time here. You've been very helpful to the commission. Great comments, good questions. We always learn from you, so good luck to you in your future duties. And I want to thank Mr. Zarzaki for the encouragement that we'll get proposals, because that's very exciting to hear. And again, Mr. Lippens, thank you for all your hard work. We really appreciate it. And Mary Bird, for all the work that you do down there. Oh my gosh, I wouldn't want to sit in your chair. But I hope that at our next meeting we don't have the air conditioning on or whatever this is going on, because I am freezing. That's it. Oh, no, I'll see you before Christmas.
Mr. Iaquinto.
I would like also to thank you, Amy, for being part of the Planning Commission. You've definitely bring some good knowledge to the commission. Thank you, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to announce the next regular meeting, December 20th, 2017. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll support. Any questions with that? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.